Right now, there's a massive diplomatic play unfolding, and it honestly could completely rewrite global partnerships as we know them. We're looking at India's Indo-Pacific ambition, a highly coordinated three-nation maneuver by Prime Minister Narendra Modi that goes far, far beyond your standard state visit.
So why is the entire world watching India's latest move so closely? Well, it all comes down to the absolutely massive stakes in this strategic theater. This isn't just about handshakes and photo ops, It's about securing critical supply chains and positioning a rising power within a highly contested global network. Literally everyone, from economists to defense analysts, is paying very close attention to see exactly how these dominoes might fall.
Okay, let's dive into this explainer. Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the three-nation tour itself. Second, why the Indo-Pacific? Third, we'll check out the meeting agenda. And finally, we'll look at the global impact.
All right, Section 1, the three-nation tour. We're mapping the diplomatic route.
The Prime Minister's itinerary here is very deliberate. Step 1 kicks off in Indonesia, right? That builds an immediate link to Southeast Asia. Then, Step 2 shifts down to Australia, really engaging the continental heavyweight. And finally, Step 3 brings the whole tour over to New Zealand. This isn't just some random travel plan. It's a calculated geographic arc drawn straight through some of the Southern Hemisphere's most absolutely vital maritime corridors.
And during these stops, who's actually at the table? Well, the Prime Minister is sitting down with national leaders, top business representatives, and key strategic partners. The overarching goal for India here is to seriously strengthen its position across trade, investment, technology, and security. By engaging directly with both government officials and the private sector innovators who are actually building the future, India is covering all its bases to solidify its footprint. And honestly, that's something that shifts the economic landscape for all of us.
Moving on to Section 2, why the Indo-Pacific? Let's look at the global strategic theater.
So the crucial point is, why here? Why the Indo-Pacific? Well, it's really no longer just a geographic term on a map. It is literally the central chessboard for modern global strategy. This is one of the world's most important strategic regions where the heavyweights, the major countries, are rapidly and heavily increasing their cooperation. It's crowded, it's highly competitive, and it is incredibly valuable.
And what exactly are all these major players suddenly so hyper-focused on? It really boils down to 5 critical areas: trade, maritime security, technology, supply chains, and regional stability. Think about it. Over half of the world's maritime trade passes right through these exact waters. So practically every major power relies heavily on these shipping lanes. This is the precise framework of cooperation that India wants a much larger piece of.
Which brings us perfectly to India's core motivation. They are actively seeking expanded economic opportunities and much greater strategic influence. By anchoring itself more firmly to Indonesia, Australia, and New Zealand, India isn't just looking for some quick economic boost. No, they're playing the long game here. They want to ensure they're a primary architect of the region's future, rather than just sitting on the sidelines watching it happen.
All right, on to Section 3, the meeting agenda. Let's see what's happening behind closed doors.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how cleanly it divides India's priorities into 2 interconnected pillars. On the economic side, we've got trade agreements and investment opportunities, with India actively pitching its massive domestic market for bilateral business. But the security and tech focus, that is where it gets incredibly modern. We are talking defense cooperation, clean energy, artificial intelligence, critical minerals, and maritime security. India is laser-focused on locking down these specific, next-generation partnerships because they need them to future-proof both their economy and their national defense.
But, we do have to remember the reality of international diplomacy. You can have the most brilliant strategic agenda in the world, but official outcomes depend entirely on the actual meetings held during the tour. Diplomacy is a live, dynamic process. As we speak, the real, final handshake deals are being hammered out behind those closed doors. Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds into the global impact and the ripple effects of the tour.
So, what are the experts predicting here? They're saying that forging these stronger ties is going to tangibly benefit India by really boosting direct investment and massively expanding domestic business opportunities. But beyond just the pure economics, this is projected to dramatically improve cooperation in tech and innovation. On a geopolitical level, these moves are designed to increase India's role in regional diplomacy, essentially elevating them from just a participating nation to a leading, dominant voice.
But again, potential is one thing, right? Reality is another. The true, long-term global impact of this pivot is ultimately going to depend on the actual agreements and public announcements made during this visit. The groundwork has absolutely been laid, and it's a solid foundation, but the ink still needs to dry on the treaties before we see the real-world scale of this shift.
Which leaves us with this one vital question. Will this diplomatic tour permanently strengthen India's global position in the Indo-Pacific? We've walked through the deliberate route. We understand why this region is so absolutely critical, and we've analyzed that high-stakes agenda, covering everything from basic trade to advanced artificial intelligence. But the ultimate success of this mission, that is unfolding right now. So what do you think?